Hello and welcome to the Stateside Soccer Show live from Orlando Walt Disney World Resort. By the way, I got an audience in front of me too. My wife's right in front of me here doing her stuff. But I am Jordan Wiegand, and I am joined, as always, by Mr. Front Row himself, Logan Stump.
Is that what they're starting to call me on the streets? That's kind of
Well, I'm
exciting.
starting to call you.
Well, I mean, you've arrived in Orlando. I'm imagining just people going, front row Logan. But no, it was cool, man.
I was like, remember who's his editor? It's this
right.
guy.
That is true. My editor-in-chief, my producer, my boss. Some people even call him my side podcaster. So.
No, you have a side podcast.
Oh, that's right.
Unfortunately, we're not able to be in the same room to do this. I don't even know how that would work, honestly. I worry
That's
about
what I was thinking.
Like my mic picking up you and your mic picking up me and
just picking up each other.
When we're in the same room, we just use one mic.
No, it wouldn't be as good then if we use just one mic. Yeah.
That's true. Although I know that the guys over at Austin TV, they do, or We Are Austin TV, they do like the studio. But
they have the legit mics. They have
the sure mics. But I was sitting there thinking about them going, would we have to be on the camera? And then my thing would be like, am I looking at you too much or am I looking at the camera? Like, how does that work?
You have to do both.
Yeah,
like you're on TV.
Right.
You have to kind of stand like this where you're looking at both. But we're not here to talk about what could be with the podcast. We're here to talk about all of the MLS action that took place yesterday on Saturday, March 4th. And Logan was at the game. If you were following our Twitter feed, you saw that he had a really great seat in the press box. Lucky guy. And then he's going to go through his experiences with that. He got some great clips as well from the managers and some players. So we'll play those as we get to the game. But overall, we really just want to talk at first just about the weekend as a whole. And I just realized as we're kind of doing this on the road here that I forgot to pull up the Word document that has all of our notes on the computer. So let me get that.
Okay. I just did the same thing. I was like, oh, the episode notes. It throws me off that you're not in front of a green screen, or that you're not in Subaru Park in their press box.
Right, in the press box at Subaru Park, yeah.
With the lights on.
Where it still says Talon Energy Stadium.
Yeah, it's confused.
Yes, I can't find a more updated one. Okay, so three clubs kicked off their campaign as of this recording. LA Galaxy, LAFC, and the Chicago Fire. LAFC opened up with a home win against Portland. Chicago Fire hosted NYCFC, and Dallas host the Galaxy. So we'll be talking about those games and how those teams started off the season. We did get some news roundups here. Sporting KC has acquired the defender Danny Rosero from Colombia's Atletico Junior. So that'll help their defense, but they got to get some more goals is kind of the problem that they're having so far in the young season. Santiago Rodriguez returns to NYCFC as a designated player. So he was on a 18-month loan from the Uruguay-based City Football Group. So he's coming in 8 games. 8 goals, 18 assists, and 60 games for NYCFC in his previous stint. So, good start. Good move for NYCFC, who really needed to start bringing in some players because they have been god-awful. We'll talk about them as we get later in the show. And then kind of like the uplifting note that's not like a transfer, is just St. Louis, right? Kicked off their first ever home game at City Park. And things were not really going well for them to start the game. But, their fans, this was a big thing, right? The fans never sat down during the whole game. They had, it looks like an earthquake because my wife is erasing something. They kicked off their season and they had nobody sitting like the entire game. They had like little placards that they hold up, like the cards, the spell out stuff. So it was a really cool moment, and I'm pretty sure I flipped over to MLS 360 to like catch the opening of that because I really wanted to see how the atmosphere would be at St. Louis. You know, I think I saw somebody. I think it was Cheyenne from Between Clean Sheets where she posted that tickets for Charlotte St. Louis were going for like $500, and she said that she had paid like less than half of that or less than half of that for a World Cup knockout stage in 2022 Qatar. So kind of a crazy, I guess, the demand of St. Louis there, but also, we just signed with MLS, just signed with Ticketmaster. So I mean, that could just have been $400 worth of fees as we're accustomed to now. But yeah, so I mean, they had a great stadium display. They had a tifo, they had a full stadium card display. Everything was going great. Sold out crowd of 22,423. And the first goal scored at City Park was not from a St. Louis player. It actually went to Charlotte, and it was Copetti who scored the first goal in City Park history. But Charlotte equalized, and it was an own goal. I mean, not Charlotte equalized. Sorry, St. Louis equalized. It was an own goal. And so it was still no actual St. Louis player that had scored when it was 1-1. But they finished the game 3-1, Logan. And they did get a penalty to make it 2-1. And that was the first ever goal scored by an actual St. Louis player at their new stadium. And that was Edward Leuven. Or Loven, right? It's like umlaut over the O. But he was the first one to score a player. Sorry, I have 2 hours of sleep. He was the first one to score as a player of St. Louis, and then Klaus finished it in the 71st minute. Really, he was gifted that goal. I mean, that was we saw a lot of that in the early 2 weeks here of just defenders just kind of handing the ball over to attackers. But before we kind of dive into the game, because that's kind of the game I want to start with, Logan, just kind of talking about the fans and the atmosphere, what was your thoughts as you got to sit down and watch, kind of replay of it or highlights of it after you came home from the Orlando game?
Yeah, so it was actually one of the games that I turned back on just to kind of see how the atmosphere was, and I was shocked by just how alive that fan base was. And I guess it shouldn't shock me because I've been around St. Louis fans for so long. And again, I'll say it every time that I talk, it's not St. Louis until it dies, but I'm a Cubs fan. So seeing their support for the Cardinals and just at Sports City in general, it's just electric. And, there was a news article that was written that said that they had 25,000 seats, that it can fit 25,000 on a good day. Not including like special invitees and things like that, standing room or the press boxes or whatever it might be. And they said that 60,000 people wanted season tickets, and they had to go into like this wait list. And it shows. And Jordan, it's one of those stadiums that, right, it's built to look like a Premier League stadium. Like it feels, when I was watching it, it's the only stadium that I've ever turned on in MLS that I felt wasn't Americans, that wasn't the American stadiums. The way that it looks and sits in the dark, it looks Premier League. And I don't know what it is about it. I think because it goes up quickly. I don't know. And it sits down and it sits dark, and it just.
If you want up quickly, you want to go to Audi Field, because
Really?
let me tell you, I took my dad there for his birthday in like 2018 after it opened, and those seats are steep, man. Like, I don't know how many people I heard mention about like how they felt like they were going to like fall down these stairs, especially for people that have been drinking. Like that's kind of a worrisome thing. But no, I understand what you mean about St. Louis, the stadium. I thought it looked really cool. It's kind of like the game I was focused on, especially after the Union game finished. I was kind of really focused on I turned that one on. I turned off MLS 360, put that on my phone, and then watched the actual broadcast of St. Louis and Charlotte. And I thought that one was a really exciting match, 2-1 at halftime. And the fact that St. Louis, by the way, here's a stat that Fox tweeted out earlier today, I think it was, that Scroll back up. St. Louis becomes the 4th expansion team in MLS history to win both of their first 2 matches. And the fact that they sit like 6 points. And if we're looking at the West, they're sitting in 2nd place. Now, here's the thing. It kind of feels eerily similar to Austin's first season, where Austin started out the season pretty good in their like first 5 or 6 games and then kind of tailed off. So, still wondering, is that going to be an issue for St. Louis? Is it just, kind of like everybody was amped up for that home game in the first game of the season that they went out and got those wins? And I want to ask you this, do you think that they're actually a team that might be able to put together a good season? Or is it just like this adrenaline of our first ever game and our first ever home game, and maybe they might tail off a bit like next week?
It was interesting, and I had that thought too. I was like, okay, so they start with 6 points, and Andrew Wiebe actually was the one that brought up the stat, I think on the MLS wrap-up show, where he said, I think 80% of teams, it's like right around the 80% mark. 80%.
78.
Was it 78?
I think so. I think that's what I saw.
Yeah, 78% of the teams that start with 6 points usually make the playoffs, which is, that's crazy to think that. And here we were, because again, when we're doing previews and stuff, I think people are always like, oh man, they always go back on the new team. I'm like, you cannot predict a new team because you just don't know how it's going to go. They usually have such an infusion of different players and coaches and players from different countries. You have no idea how it's going to go. I thought, when you look at Atlanta United and how they come into the league, and they came in like gangbusters, and then you have somebody like Charlotte who come in who are kind of middle of the pack, but then you really have somebody like Cincinnati who comes in and stinks up the joint for a couple of years. Like you just don't know. You got the whole spectrum of what these teams can look like. And I think with this expansion side, Jordan, I'm impressed with their defense. Honestly, I thought even holding Austin to 2 goals, and then now holding Charlotte to 1, I thought they played well defensively, and I think they'll get better defensively with Tim Parker back there. I think that's a solid add. And you and I talked about this with the guys over at Ball Watching, and we said, hey, this team's going to be a good team. I think competitively, we didn't know that they were going to be this good, I think. And I think this was a pretty good test to see just how good they might be. And I'm interested to see them play bigger clubs, if they're going to run up against the Seattle, if they're running up against the Portland. They've already taken care of Austin, and they capitalize on mistakes. And I think Klaus is a legit goal scorer, and I think that's somebody that can score in this league. And that's all you really need in this.
So David commented here on YouTube, what do you think of St. Louis City SC? They became the 4th expansion team to win their first 2 games. Hey, that's actually what we were just talking about right before you joined us. But yeah, we're kind of trying to figure out, is it the high of the first ever game and the first ever home game that has led them to this? Or is it an actual solidly built team? I do think they have a lot of good pieces. It's just the question of, they're in the Western Conference. Western Conference is tougher than the Eastern Conference. It's funny. I was just recording, the Closed Pyramid yesterday before I left, and that's going to be talking all lower league soccer. And I was previewing the USL Championship, and that episode's going to drop Thursday. But it was very similar. USL Championship, Western Conference, very strong. Eastern Conference, not. And it was just kind of funny to see that is something that is a trend, not just in our MLS league here, but in USL Championship. But I think St. Louis City is probably going to. I think I'm going to raise my expectations from our previous show. I think I had them like last in the West. I think that they can finish better than that. Like you said, 78% or something of teams that have 6 points out of their first 2 games can, make the playoffs. Now, of course, that number is probably going to be astronomically higher. Now we have 9 playoff teams instead of 7. So, so here you go. David says, as a St. Louis City fan, I was so happy yesterday. I was in City Park watching their match. That's awesome. That is really great to hear because, people have talked about St. Louis as being a hotbed of American soccer for so long, and they just never really got the chance for the team until really once the Rams left, did that really start kicking the tires more and more. But, it was electric watching that game and, like, the atmosphere and how everyone was willing their team to win and that they didn't really let it get them. Like, they were quiet a little bit, right? After the first goal, because it was a shock. I didn't think Charlotte was creating super much there at the beginning of the match, and then they just totally rebound. You get a little luck, right? You get two Alomas own goal. And it was funny because it was like right before that they were talking about, I think, like a corner kick where they're like, watch Tuoloma. He scored a lot for Portland. And then, he didn't score there. And then like a couple plays later, he's scoring one on his own net. It took a weird bounce. Yeah. He's like, I've scored for my team before. I'm going to score against my team now. But I'm super excited for what St. Louis is doing as like a whole. I think that they're getting it right now. And do we think that they can win against the Portland Timbers? I would say it's MLS. There's no reason to think that they can't win against the Portland Timbers, especially I was kind of hot and cold on the Timbers because I thought they played pretty okay against SKC. They took some chances. They got only one goal. I felt like we talked about it last week. We felt like they should have scored more than one. But, then it was 3-0 LAFC early in that game. And they clawed their way back to 3-2. And they almost got an equalizer against LAFC. So really, I think it depends on what Timbers team shows up. And what I would say for St. Louis as like what they need to do is score first and try not to let them back into the game. St. Louis has had two very different games where they had a lead against Austin, blew it, then went down, and then came back. And then this game where they started off down and then had to come back and put them away. So I do like that they've won two different ways with two different type of score lines that they were going for. But in my opinion, the way that the Timbers are playing, it would be better for St. Louis to, and this sounds dumb to say because every team would want to go up a goal first, but I feel like that's what St. Louis would want to do is get a 1-0, but you can't let the Timbers back into it because they showed against LAFC, the best team in MLS, that once they were let back in, 3-0, I was over at my parents' house and I watching 3-0. I'm like, this game's over. And then all of a sudden it's 3-2 in the 80th minute. And you're like thinking, okay, they actually have a chance here to make this interesting. So really, I guess it depends on what type of Portland team shows up because I do think St. Louis can probably hang with Portland, like no problem.
Yeah. And you're going to Providence Park and having now talked to Oscar Pereira and Pat Noonan, I think the expectations of MLS coaches is to get a result of some kind on the road. And usually they're okay with getting a point on the road. And I think in this league, Jordan, you and I've covered this enough to know a point on the road is exponentially better in the long run to help you increase your chances of making the playoffs. And I think with 9 teams now getting in the playoffs, you get a point in Providence Park, one of the toughest places to play in MLS, especially with how cold it'll probably be, with how rowdy the fan base is, with Evander out there playing as one of the best 10s in this league at that point. And they're a tough team to beat on at home. So, again, I think, yes, I think St. Louis can stick with Portland. I just think it's a matter of, like, the roof has to come down a little bit, right? At some point, you're 6 goals in, you're leading, tied for the lead in the whole league with goals scored with Seattle, who's looked like the cream of the crop. So I'd expect some regression. But again, I think even with a little bit of regression, I think the St. Louis team's pretty damn competitive.
Yeah, and I think what we also have to think of, that's a good question, David. I'm not actually sure who would win their first 3 matches.
I'll check and see if I can find.
Yeah, see if you can find that. If anything, I would think maybe the Fire. They won the MLS Cup that year, so I would think that that's probably your best bet, 1998. But what I would think here is St. Louis is kind of like still a big question mark for me. Like, I love the fan support. I like how they've been playing. But, Austin didn't really impress in their first 2 weeks. So nobody expected St. Louis to do as well as they did in that game. So obviously you got to give credit to St. Louis. I'm not trying to not. But then also you look at what Charlotte is, and Charlotte is probably not going to live up to expectations this year is my thought. So at the end of the season, we might look back and say these were two games that they should have won. Maybe the Austin one's still questionable, but I think the Charlotte one is one that they probably could look at and say we can beat up on this Eastern Conference team that is kind of in a weird spot after a successful season last year, and it doesn't really feel like I don't really know what to say about Charlotte. The fan support is there just as it is in St. Louis, but I'm kind of like, I don't know if they did enough to really convert like the team into a better team for this season. So there's question marks there. I think Charlotte is kind of a question mark. I think the first big test was Austin, but I think the next big test is, can you go on an away game to Providence Park against Portland, who's hot and cold, but they have a great manager in Giovanni Savarese, and then can you get at least a point? I think getting a point there, like you said, Logan, would be pretty big. I mean, think about it that way. St. Louis, 7 points in 3 games. I think anybody in St. Louis would have taken that if you had told them at the beginning of the season with that schedule. So if they can go there and get a point, I think they'll feel pretty good.
I can almost confidently say that no team has ever started with 3 straight wins out of their first 3. So
yeah, you only
right
have to
now
look at those 4 teams.
Yeah,
you only have to look at those 4 teams,
right.
Which were LAFC,
The Fire,
Chicago Fire, and I might be able to find it. It was on
Austin, maybe? No, Austin definitely did not. Chicago Fire did not start. They started with 2 wins straight and then lost to the KC Wizards. Jordan, the attendance for that game was 4,000 people.
That's like smaller than some
That's
USL crowds
insane.
now. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
All right, look up Seattle 2009 and LAFC 2018.
LAFC 2018.
Yeah. Did they win 3 in a row?
I'm
First
doing
3?
the Sounders right now. Sounders looks like yes.
They won 3.
Sounders. Wait, what the heck? Why the hell? No, never mind. They played some USL team. Unless Ventura County was an MLS. No, sorry, that's preseason. Hold on. Regular season. Yes, there we go. Seattle did win their first 3 against the Red Bull, RSL, and Toronto. So,
all right, now look up LAFC.
LAFC, what, 18?
2018.
Right.
First 3 games. Yep. Find that out. David, meanwhile, says City Park is a good stadium. I like it. The fans are amazing. It's a beautiful ballpark. You know, I'd rather that than – I know Charlotte's getting 60,000 at Bank of America, but I'd rather probably have a soccer-specific stadium that fits 22 than a football stadium that fits 60 that's playing on turf. Or are they going to grass at Charlotte? I don't remember. I think they're moving from grass to turf is what they did.
LAFC did not in their first 3.
Okay, so really if they do win their 3rd game, they will be the 2nd team, it seems like, to do that, with Seattle being the first. That's pretty
That's insane. Yeah, I'm glad I did that research. That's kind of fun.
There you go. Yeah. All right. I guess let's move on to some of these other games here. We had I talked a little bit about LAFC 3, Portland 2. I predicted a 2-1 LAFC win, and when it was 3-1, I was like, hey, I was kind of close. And at 3-2, I felt like, hey, I was kind of close because I was only, it was a 1-goal loss for Portland. But, they had some great coverage on Apple TV, and I think on Fox, too, of the ring ceremony. Gareth Bale was there, like Will Ferrell was there. Bale walked out MLS Cup. That was just really cool seeing how they did that whole broadcast, and they got to reveal the banners that they put up there. So just really cool to see that, and them getting their championship rings, which I know is different from other leagues, right? They usually get medals, but I like the rings better. I think that's just something America gets right in our sports. But so Portland had a lot of trouble defending set pieces that LAFC got for their first 2 goals. And Opoku Opoku goal made it 3-0. And then, like we said, it was 3-0. Everybody's flying high. You're thinking this game's done and dusted already. And then Evander scores, and then Paredes scores to make it 3-2, and that's how it finished. But man, I was actually like, my emotions, not really emotions, I guess, because I'm not a fan of I'm not like a fan of either team, but it was just like, as a casual watching, started pulling for Portland to equalize to just make it even more hectic, right? I like, usually whenever that happens, whenever a team's winning like 3-0, and then if teams get like 2 goals, and then it's like the 80th minute, I'm like, ooh, this would be fun if somebody else, if they equalize here, because just the chaos, right? MLS After Dark, even though it was a 4 o'clock kickoff.
Yeah, I in the same way. Like, whenever teams start to come back into it, if they're not a team that I'm rooting for, I'm like, all right, like, I'd love to see a comeback, especially because I think it's more fun too, as a casual, to see a team come into a ring ceremony and blow the team out. Usually they do ring ceremonies against the teams they've beaten to get to the ring, which is always kind of fun. In this case, I don't think.
No, because they beat Portland to win Supporter Shield. In Portland, right. So that was still a big thing, I guess, to kind of show off against Portland.
Did you see the ring?
Yeah, it looks cool. It's dark,
it's beautiful.
It's really nice.
Yeah,
but they even carried out the Supporter Shield too, so they still kind of rubbed it in.
That's fun.
They carried out the Supporter Shield. They carried out the Western Conference Final Trophy, and then they wheel out MLS Cup.
Yeah, so, but then they called Seattle for the CONCACAF Champions League. Like, can we borrow it? We're playing Portland.
Yeah. Let's show this off. Let's team up here. But all in all, LAFC start their season with 3 points. We didn't get to see them last week due to the weather issues. Looked pretty good for a good chunk of this game, and then the defense was kind of a worry there. Maybe they got a little too comfortable is kind of the vibe I got with it, but I think at the end of the day, LA fans at home would be happy with 3-2 win, even if it got a little nervy there. Starting off with 3 points. They had a great ring ceremony. They didn't have a part that dampened the day afterwards, where you get your rings and then lose the game. So I don't know. I thought for a while I was 3-0. I was like, this is the best team in MLS, and maybe it still is. But then 3-2, I was like, maybe it's not. Maybe we were right to kind of think that they might regress just a little bit. Anything to add, or are you good?
No. I think you're right. It's so weird because when the teams are playing their first games, it's kind of like, oh, I forgot. They're on their first game. But then you look at the second week and go, God, teams were awful this week. So
we'll have a few of those. So talk about a team that turned it around, though. Columbus Crew lost 4-1 to the Union last week. They go out and beat DC in Columbus 2-0. There's also a funny story I was talking about here. It was on the commentary. Lloyd Sam used to play for DC United. He was talking about Stephen Goff, who covers DC United for the Washington Post, and he was just saying that how tapped in Stephen Goff is, because he even broke the news of Lloyd Sam being released from the team, a few years ago, and that was the way that Lloyd found out about getting, which sucks. We hear about this with baseball too, where we're and NBA and all that, where players will find out of trades and releases through Twitter or through TV. And it's kind of like, can you just give the heads up before you break the news? But I guess not. But it seems like Lloyd Sam wasn't salty about it. He actually was really praising Stephen Goff about it. So that was cool. But Zella Ryan, who played pretty well in the first half last week, comes out, plays a great game this week. He scores 2 goals, right? And just some really good finishes too. That I don't know. I mean, this is exactly the Crew team I thought we were going to get under Nancy. I thought they were going to be better. This is as if they had finished more of their chances against the Union. That they didn't really put that many on target. They got some shots last week, didn't put a lot on target. This week, they kind of get rewarded by putting some on target and scoring 2 goals. And DC, had some chances that kind of flew over the bar, but other than that, it was mostly, Columbus at home playing well, get Wilfred Nancy his first win as a crew manager.
The tifo was in French. That was cool. But yeah, no, I like you said, Jordan, and you texted. I will never forget this. You texted me and said this Zelleray Chucho connection this season is off to a flying start and one that should be very dangerous for the league. And you said they're absolutely dominating the Union. Well, then they go in and they play DC at home, and they just it's just domination from the initial whistles. So I think that with the crew, I think they even look to add some pieces in the summer. And then this team becomes one of the contending teams in the Eastern Conference. I don't remember where did we have them? You had them.
I had them in the playoffs, I think.
6th. Yeah, you have them in 6th, and I have them in 7th. Okay, so
that's the high end of the playoffs.
That's almost home field.
But I just want to correct myself here. DC did have actually more possession and more shots. They had 15 shots to Columbus's 12. But again, like Columbus got more shots on goal than DC, and that's what helped. 4 shots on goal, 2 of those got converted, but still out of 12 shots, 4 of those only on goal. They just got to get better at kind of hitting the target. But that first goal by Zelleray, assist goes to Chucho Hernandez. So there you go. We're getting that link going as well. By the way, 20,000 people, Blower.com field, whatever it's called. Okay, so let's move on to a game that I thought was pretty thrilling, and I guess surprised that we didn't pick this as one of our games of the week, right? Atlanta-Toronto. This was a fun one. Toronto took a lead with the Bernardeschi goal to start the second half. Insigne is out still, but it sounds like he may not be out that long compared to what maybe we were speculating before. And then just 8 minutes later, Atlanta come back and equalize. And they actually held on to most of the ball and had more scoring chances. There was also a one where they were close to scoring the winner, Georgios Giacomakis, right, who comes in, first game ever. He got transferred, right? He's coming in, first game as a Atlanta player, hits the ball in the back of the net. They call Purata offside in the build-up to the play, and I don't see that. I don't see that he was offside. It looked no angle that they showed me was I like, oh, that was the right call. I thought it looked so borderline that he looked onside, and I think that in those circumstances, we should let it play. People want to see goals; they don't want to see offside flags. It's kind of my thought there.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too. I saw one tweet that was like, supposedly the officials on the side are usually told to keep the flag down and let VAR decide. And had they done that, Jordan, it would have been a goal, because then it's inclusive. You don't know what the evidence is actually saying. So then it would have counted as a goal, which I thought was an interesting perspective, because if she had kept the flag down, then you've got no offside call, because that's what they're kind of taught to do. I think the same thing with the NFL is they're taught not to do it until they're told to call it as you would on the field, as you saw it, and then maybe not call it if you've got other things. Basketball as well, they do. I think it's the 3-point line. If you step on the line, not to call it and let it kind of play out. Same thing in baseball. So it's interesting that I didn't really think of that perspective of like, if she had kept her flag down, like sometimes they're taught to do, then this would have been a goal going the other way, and Atlanta gets 3 points. So I think
what they're actually told to do is keep it down until the ball is in the net. Yeah. So that way, if there's not a is, stop. Yeah. That way, you don't stop a goal from going in, because then VAR could overturn it. Yeah. But I think with the way that she called this, there wasn't enough evidence from VAR to overturn it. Right. Either way, if she ruled it on or if she ruled it off, I don't think there's enough either way, and that means they get stuck with what the call on the field was. Unfortunately, because I thought that was what a great story that would have been, coming in here and being like, Giacomakis comes in and scores. First appearance for Atlanta. They got their new Joseph, right? We could go overreact on that as well. But unfortunately that. But let's switch to the Toronto side of this, by the way. Toronto, they had to start kind of tough. 2 road games, right? We've talked about that. They now go to face what, Crew, is it? Because I remember them being like a 3-game gauntlet that we were just talking about. But so
yeah, the Crew. You're right.
Crew, right, at Toronto. So we have now, looking at that, they've got 1 point. They lost against DC late. They had a lead here and blew it. They almost got the loss here, if that's ruled onside. Again, I'm worried about Toronto. I'm worried about how they're going. I mean, it was nice Bernardeschi gets the goal. But this team as a whole, Sean Johnson looked good at times. And then it's like, I don't know, I feel like right now this team isn't doing enough. Again, it's 2 weeks in. Don't want to overstate that. But it's just, we're looking at Bradley's tenure as a whole now, not just the first 2 games of the season. And I thought this was, such a great signing for Toronto. And so far it hasn't really panned out.
Yeah, I guess if you're going to take away something positive for it, their XG against, so opposing teams have an XG of like right around 1. So tightening it up a little bit defensively, which was a huge concern for them last year. Chris Mapinga's gone. Matt Hedges steps in. Sean Johnson now comes in as goalkeeper. Alex Bono is out. I think they've done enough as far as like the defense is concerned. But Jordan, I think if we talked about this, if the Italian duo, if one of them goes down, this team's just not deep. And that's where they're going to run into a lot of problems. They're just not going to be able to run guys out to replace a lot of these guys that are going to miss time.
All right, let's talk about the disappointment of the night here. On my end, anyway. Inter Miami 2, Philadelphia Union 0. Union just didn't have it last night at all. Miami scored 2 great goals, like 2 really great goals. The second one was the best goal, and people were saying that's the only way you can beat the Union. No, obviously not, because the Union didn't look great. And because that was the second goal. So they already had a goal advantage on us. But, Robert Taylor was the one that scored the second goal. But Phil Neville said he was very impressed after not creating much, because there was a while where they didn't really create that many chances either. 2 shots on goal, 2 of those go into the back of the net, of course. But here's the thing that I think people are not really talking about too much when it comes to Miami, is the fact that they have 2 clean sheets to start the season. And they've won their first 2 games of the season, which, Logan, we talked about St. Louis doing that. They're the 4th club in history to do that as a new club. But Miami has never won the first 2 games of their season until this year.
Yeah, they've got more points than the new DPs. So, that's always a good start to the season. But now, jokes aside, Phil Neville was thrilled. He's thrilled with the way that they look defensively. And that's a big thing with Miami that you and I have talked about, because defensively, they've just tried to Band-Aid the back. Who was the guy they brought? Was it Shawcross? Was that who it was that they brought in from?
Yeah, he was there, right?
Yeah, at some point.
Barely, right?
Yeah,
I have to look up how long he was there now.
Right. I was going to say, because they've gone through center backs and defensive players like nobody's business. I think they've had every defender employed at some point in time, because they just are trying to find somebody. Luckily, DeAndre Yedlin worked out for him and worked out well.
How many games? How many games do you think he played?
3.
12.
Okay. I really didn't think he played that much, because he was not talked about a ton.
12 games. He is actually the assistant coach for Inter Miami 2 right now.
Yeah, that's exciting. Weird.
Yes.
I didn't know that. But yeah, no.
Phil, you were just talking about Phil Neville being so happy. Something tells me he wasn't very happy today watching the Manchester United game. No.
It was funny because they had, I forget, Nigel, the guy that does it with the wrap up, and he was talking about, if he had any fun stories about Phil Neville, and he's like, no, nothing appropriate for TV about Phil. But he did ask, what does he think about Phil Neville and this Inter Miami team? And they said, once Phil figured out how to get talent into this team, and that he started to kind of get the players that he needed to kind of fill out this 11 and that depth, it was going to be a problem for the rest of the league, just because of how brilliant of a soccer mind he is. I think we're starting to see a little bit of it now. That's a huge win to beat Philadelphia. And I know it's in Miami and it's second week. On the flip side, if you're Philadelphia Union fans, I wouldn't be concerned too much just because, again, it's second week. If this was like the 7th or 8th week, you'd start to go, okay, that's a little strange. Like, but I think Miami's a good team. And I think if they add one more piece, they're a good team to compete.
Yeah, Miami has played the Union tough before. I think we talked about that.
Yeah.
But I'm a little worried. If you're a Union fan, I think you're a little worried because there's a few things, right? There's Curtin's last year, right, on contract. So you kind of worry about that. But what you also worry about is they didn't look great the first half against the Crew. They turned it on, but also they got help, 2 penalties, right, to kind of get them back in the game and get the lead and make it look a little bit more flattering than it was. And in this game, they looked almost exactly like they did in the first half of the Crew game and just couldn't get anything going. No attack. That really had no attack. And that's worrisome because they had such a good attack last year. There's, I think, a little bit reason to be worried, and especially when it comes to Champions League, right? When we're going to the Champions League, so Union did create 11 shots, by the way, and 4 on goal, but it didn't feel like it at all. But when we're looking at Champions League, they had to go right from the game yesterday, pretty much. Today, they flew to El Salvador for their Champions League match, which is on like Tuesday, right? Tuesday or Wednesday? Tuesday. And that's worrisome because usually we want our clubs to be usually Champions League actually starts before the season, and we kind of struggle because of that. This year, it's 2 weeks into the season, so teams are still a little rusty, but now you have to go and play 2 legs in the Champions League, and you're hoping it'll pan out. And then the fact, too, that what's worrisome as well, I know I'm going to keep using that word, but the first game, it was pretty much the strongest lineup that they could put out there, struggled first half. This game, they ran it out with the same lineup when we know we have a game on Tuesday. So I'm just kind of wondering how we're going to approach the Champions League game for the Union. So I don't know, just kind of where I'm at as a Union fan. I saw kind of similar sentiment and just like how bad the game was for them yesterday as well on my timeline.
Yeah, no, I get that. But I still think second week, it's just so rusty and messy, and
we're supposed to overreact.
Okay. I think the Union might be in trouble. Wooden spoon.
Yeah. This is our week 2 overreaction.
They might beat somebody over the head with a wooden spoon, but not actually get one.
No, but Miami should be good, I think. When we're looking at it, I think this is a team that can make a jump a little bit more this year than maybe we had predicted originally. I forget where we put them. I think you were down on Miami, weren't you?
Let's see. I have it pulled up. It says.
Oh, yeah,
Miami.
You have them 10th. I have them 9th. I have them at least making the playoffs, Logan.
Oh, wow. Throw me under the hypothetical playoff.
You're going to have to revise that now. But yeah, so I mean, I don't know. I think they'll have a good run here. But let's move on to New England. I don't think there's too much to talk about here. 3-0 New England over Houston. Houston having an awful start to the season here. Bobby Wood gets his first goal as a New England Revolution player. Just a dominant performance by New England. DeJuan Jones having some great passes, from the outside back position. You have just quality decision making. New England looked like the New England of old of like 2020, 2019, whatever year it was. So pretty good for New England. Houston just a huge disappointment. And they're starting off with 2 Eastern Conference teams too, by the way. So
yeah, they're just so underwhelming. They really are. Again, they could have been a safe bet if you're into the betting thing of wooden spoon. I mean, this is a team that I think is going to struggle mightily to score goals, and they can't defend. So that's thought is a good mix.
No, not typically.
New England looked great, though. I thought Carly Seal looked good. I thought they just looked, like you said, like the vintage New England Revolution, which is fantastic news for them.
Great for Bobby Wood to score, too.
Yeah.
Coming back from injury.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bruce had him playing over Vironi, so DP signing, sitting on the bench, and Bobby Wood. And then Bruce said, I played him because he scores goals in this league. and Bruce is pretty straightforward, so I'm sure the message is felt.
Well, what if I were to tell you, Logan, that there was a 0-0 draw over the weekend, and it was the first one of the season, but you weren't there for it. It was the Red Bulls and
that's
Nashville.
Good. I don't want to go to two of them.
0-0 draw. It was the first draw of the season, and it was the first 0-0 draw of the season, right? We didn't have a draw before this.
No draws. Nope.
Oh, yeah, Atlanta-Toronto.
Oh, that's right.
So that was the first draw of the season.
Fake draw.
But the first 0-0 draw was the Red Bulls Nashville. And then just a few seconds later, the game you went to finished 0-0 as well. I don't think there's too much to say about Nashville Red Bulls. I think, I don't know, wasn't that great of a match.
Jordan, there's 4 teams currently in the MLS that don't have a goal. Can you name 3?
How many teams?
4. There's 3.
4 teams that don't have a goal.
Obviously, there's a reason I mentioned this in this game.
Okay, yeah. So it's got to be Red Bull.
Yeah.
Houston.
Yes. Wrong. No, sorry. Houston did score.
Houston scored last week?
Yeah, last week. I forgot.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, you want a hint? There's 2 in the West, 2 in the East. And you got one of them. Red Bulls won.
Oh my goodness.
Sporting.
Sporting.
Yeah, that's one.
And how many do I need to name? 3 or 4?
3.
Okay, so I need one more.
1 in the West, 1 in the East now left. If I gave you another hint, I'd give it away completely because all you'd have to do is guess.
I almost just said Orlando, but you guys scored last week.
Yeah, barely.
Dang, I'm blanking on teams in the league now.
That's fine. You're on 2 hours of rest, and I'm surprised you got 2 of them. The Red Bull, nobody would have guessed. Even though I gave you an ultimate hit, but
I said Red Bull.
Yeah, I know you did.
Oh, okay.
I would give you another hint, but there's only 2 of 3 teams that play up there. Would not be fun.
Play up where?
Canada.
Oh, okay. Is it Montreal?
Montreal and Vancouver.
Well, Vancouver scored.
No, or Colorado.
Yeah,
Wrong
Colorado.
Mountains.
Colorado.
Right, wrong mountains.
Yeah, wrong white caps. Right?
Gosh, I'm running on 8 hours of sleep. I'm fine. I'm just stupid.
It's late though. We're recording late.
It's true. I can't read. I have it literally pulled up right here.
Vancouver fans were like, whoa.
Whoa, we scored.
Whoa, we scored in both games, by the way. All right, let's move on to Orlando, Cincy, because I know you got a lot to talk about with this one, and we got some clips to play. So this one finished 0-0. Not another not great game really from Orlando, and Cincy, played okay. Let me tell you, they barely showed this on MLS 360.
They didn't even show it on the wrap-up show. And Nigel, they were like, we would go to the other 0-0 draw. And I'm like, so you threw up the Red Bull one. No, they didn't throw that one up either. They just don't throw up the 0-0s. Because I just did a podcast. I talked 20 minutes about the game because I'm sitting here going, what the hell do I talk about?
Yeah.
And I felt weird because I'm in the press yesterday, my first press, media coverage of the team, and I'm sitting there and I'm going, there's really just nothing I can write or tweet right now besides none of these teams seem to know how to put it all together at the end.
You got creative sometimes though, where you're like,
Well, because you can speak generically, and I'm looking
Yeah.
for, I'm looking for things that I think throughout the season they become something. Like Barreal looked good. I think he's got a great chance of being a special player for Cincinnati, creating on the left-hand side, in behind Brenner, oftentimes, or Vasquez, depending on who ends up on each side of the striking core. So, again, Lucho Acosta, fantastic. I thought the Orlando defense was phenomenal. But again, sitting there thinking about all the things I could be writing, I think the biggest takeaways from me is Cincinnati still have one of the best attacks, even though they don't score. They just, I'm looking around at all their options. And I'm going, why? Where do you stop them? If they're all three still here, you don't stop them. Like Lucho's going to create for Brandon. Like it could be freaking Barreal. Like it doesn't matter who's there. And I think that's one thing. And then I think Orlando's defense, if they get Antonio Carlos back, you're looking back at like a really strong defensive duo. And that's what Pat said. And we kind of get into the next couple clips just because this is what they talked about. But
before you play the clips,
yeah, go ahead.
I just have a question for you. Like, how long do you think it'll take for them to gel? I mean, even the people that when they did point out, like the one time they showed on the 360, they're talking about how there's opportunities to play some of those forward balls, but they weren't taking them, and kind of more holding onto the ball or going backwards or going sideways. So I wonder, is that, Pereira's teams are usually pretty good offensively in his history. So I'm kind of wondering how long you think that'll take. It's only week 2, but you have a Champions League game coming up as well.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think, we'd all like the answer to it, but I think realistically, if I had to pinpoint like a specific month, I think May. I think 2 months into the season, if you get past 2 months in the season of not playing well, you're just not good. So you've got a lot of ground to make up. And it's easier in this league just because it's so volatile. It just seems like it's up and down all over the place. And it's just inconsistent most of the time. You can have a really good stretch in June and July and be back in it. But if you don't have an attack going forward in May, I think that's when you have to start looking for options, right? You got to look for somebody that can step in as a number 9. I think, Enrique Romero, like Enrique's out. I think Duncan McGuire is a good option up top, but Jordan, until they figure out if Ercan Kara can actually be the number 9, they really need him to be in front of those creative players like Martin Ojeda, Mauricio Pereira, or Facundo Torres. I still don't think you have a consistent answer on how good this attack can be, because I don't think Ercan Kara is consistent or reliable enough. And without that, I just feel like this team just isn't going to get over that hump of being a really special team. So he was awful last night. Like, I'll be straight up honest. He had 9 touches in the first half. I got the stat sheet and I was like, that's unbelievable. Like, that's bad. And 9 bad touches. Like 9 touches of, he might as well have been playing for Cincinnati's defensive midfield. Like, that's how bad it was. And I feel bad because I think he's got good talent. I think that but it just doesn't, like, there's something about the fit with him. Like, I just don't see it. And I think, their other options are so much better. And I think that's what they'll figure out. So I'm interested to kind of see what happens with Ercan Kara. He is a DP, so you want to play him, but he could be one of those DPs that in 12 games you go, okay, maybe it's time to kind of go somewhere else and figure out what to do.
Great. All right, go ahead. Play some of your clips or talk more about your experience, I guess, in the press box.
Yeah, so I think the first one I'll do is we talked to Pat Noonan first, and it's great because the lady that does the press conferences, much like probably some of the other ones, but she was great at running it, and so was he, the guy that was doing it. And basically they came in and they sat down, and their first questions asked is like, all right, like normal or like usual, what I'm going to ask you is just to kind of go over your thoughts on the game. So that way we get a good sense of like what they feel. So that's good to kind of kick that off. If anybody's ever wondered how that goes, I was always interested, but the first person's usually the PR person is saying like, summarize the game. Here's some of the stuff that you need to know. Like, and then it kicked off. Pat Noonan was first, and he talked about Orlando, and he talked about getting a point in Orlando. So I'll play that clip, and then we'll kind of talk about it. But it's interesting to hear his thoughts on the way that he thinks about Orlando City.
I was really, really pleased with our group's performance tonight. Orlando's a tough team. I know they had to rotate some bodies, but they still have some good players that were on the field tonight. And I thought our improvement with the ball was significant and allowed us to move the ball for long stretches to be able to find different ways of trying to go to goal. And I thought defensively didn't concede a whole lot. Our group did a really good job of limiting the moments of isolation where they have a lot of creativity in and around goal, and our set piece defending improved. So a lot of good improvements from our guys. So I was really pleased with that.
Yeah, so Pat was very pleased that they got out of there with 1 point, because he went on to say that Orlando is one of the most difficult places to come and play. He said with weather, the fans just in general, it's so difficult. And the way that Orlando plays defensively, they like to just get in your face and really just kind of muddy things up. And I mean, I agree with them. They usually have the double pivot holding midfield, defensive midfield, and they usually are just gangbang, and they just take you out. So it really is. It's an interesting thought that Pat was like, no, this is a good team. Like, you can tell in their creative bits that they are going to kind of put this together. They've got talent up front, and I think that's something that Pat was throughout the whole press conference. He's like, no, this is a good team. Like, you can see it in the way that they do create, the way that they do build up chances. They just didn't put it together tonight. And I think that was something that was pretty cool with Pat.
Every time I see that Cincinnati crest, I just think how much their older one was better. But
I blew it up nice and big for you.
Yeah. But no, I mean, that was some good. Always good to get the perspective of the opposing coach.
It is weird because Pat Brent, I think it's Brennan, I think, over for Cincinnati Enquirer or whatever it was. He's the beat writer for Cincinnati. He was the only Cincinnati person there only Cincinnati writer there in person. And it was like he sat down, and as soon as Pat sat down, he kind of looked at the other Pat, and went, this is just going to be a conversation between you and I. That I was like, I didn't know how to ask questions, Jordan. Like, I was so confused. I couldn't figure it out because, like, I think you get in a rotation, but, like, I didn't see anybody raising their hands. And then the mic just kept going back and forth between people. I'm like, I don't know how that works. So I've got to ask. I was like, I have no idea.
Yeah, because next time, I mean, you can ask questions,
right,
for them.
Yes. Yeah, because I felt completely comfortable. I thought, asking. I thought asking a question such as, like, watching Lucho play like he does, how important is he for that something like that? Like, how important is he for this midfield going forward in this attack? And what kind of chances does he usually create that really are that you didn't see tonight? So, but yeah, then Oscar came in and we were talking to Oscar. And Jordan, they're both very, very nice people, both very polite, very enjoyable to talk to. So that was a lot of fun. It made it more relaxed when you got guys that come in and just are having fun. Oscar had a blast. He just always smiling. So that was pretty cool. But yeah, so we sat down. We were talking to Oscar Pareja, and he gave his thoughts on the 0-0 draw. And actually, I thought, for the most part, he was about 95% positive. There's only a little bit of negativity in this one, but I'll play what he thought about the draw with Cincy.
Well, under the circumstances, and obviously with the good rival that we had in front, and guys debuting and putting that performance there, we're proud, we're happy. Of just getting a result at home. We need to win, but this team needs to balance those things. We when we cannot win it, just get the result and walk out with the point, and we gotta take it. But there's a lot of positive things that we recognize tonight, and especially the players that are coming new with the team and making us better. So we're proud.
Yeah, and he goes on to just say that the people kept asking him. I knew this would come up, but people just kept asking like CCL related. Like if it was MLS related or this game related, they threw his CCL in because they did. They rotated 5 players in. They didn't really have a strong attacking front that played in the first match. So they're guys that didn't really have a lot of game experience going into this match. They started a rookie center back in Abdi Salim, who I got to talk to, but Oscar did a lot of rotation, and a lot of it was due to, in fact, to the part that where they're going down to Mexico to play Tigres for Champions League. And so he talked a little bit about the importance of that competition. He kept saying, he goes, I don't want to talk about CCL. I don't want to talk about CCL. And then towards the end, the lady goes, Oscar, with how much time that you don't have between this game and the next game, and local media won't really be able to cover it, and nobody will really be able to talk to you pre-game. Can you talk a little bit about CCL? And he kind of looked at her and went, yeah, okay. And then he was like happy to do it, but it was funny because he kept saying the whole time, we're not talking about CCL. We're not talking about Tigres. Like, that's a different time. And then he went on to talk about it, which I thought was pretty funny. But here's his thoughts on CCL and what it means for this club.
Well, under the circumstances, and obviously, the last 2 days, and I asked the boys that we're not going to talk about Tigres. We have to focus on Cincinnati, and then you had in the back in your mind that you have to take care of the players, that you have to rotate players, that you have to bring Facu out, and he was mad at me. And then I say, don't get mad at me. You know that you're gonna come out. They wanted to do it, and then all these things, and now we finish, and now we have Tigres in front of us. It's one of the best teams in the territory, one of the best teams in the competition. They are the Super Tigres in Mexico and all those things, but we are Orlando City, and we're going to go there with faith, with character, and we know we can do this thing. And we're going to represent what we earn. And now we are in mode Tigres, and we're going to travel tomorrow. Quick turnaround. Now Cincinnati's gone, and now we go to Monterrey with positivism, with energy, and taking Orlando City to international competition for the first time, and we're proud.
So again, huge repercussion, or not repercussion, I guess the anxiousness that he feels for going to Mexico. I think the implications that it has for this city and this league, I think is massive. And again, I think he was just beaming because he finally brought Orlando City to a place where we never get to go. So I think that's cool. Jordan, you guys have been there before, so I know you can speak.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that because, I saw you retweet, the video of them pressing, the Champions League badge on the sleeve, and just wondering, like, how did that make you feel? I feel like that would be like a giddy moment, seeing that it's actually, even though you have to face off against like the toughest teams, but
yeah,
it's to be exciting.
Yeah, it's a weird feeling. It's surreal. It would be like seeing Seattle go up against a team like Real Madrid, getting to the Club World Cup because they've done well in Champions League. So just the prospect of us being able to play in competitions this big, to play Tigres, and then to be able to play teams in Mexico and Liga MX that you just grew up watching, especially if you're a little bit younger than I, because I think Mexican soccer was always on TV. You watched it when Mexican soccer was pretty much the only thing on TV, and MLS got some kind of back burner coverage on some odd network, but it just seems surreal at this point. And I think Oscar too kind of felt that. And then it was interesting to kind of hear Gaston and them talk about it. Was just, this doesn't feel real because they're getting a chance to go to Mexico.
It's cool. Do you want to play the clip of your question that
you
asked?
So I asked a question to Abdi Salim, who is the center back from Syracuse, got his first MLS playing time start. It's a massive game. Cincinnati, a big rival. But I wanted to ask him how it felt to play in front of these fans that he's just been kind of dreaming of since probably when he's a little kid.
I know fans were happy to see you play. How did it feel getting in front of the wall and kind of playing in front of these fans that are so passionate?
At first I was nervous because I'm just standing there and I'm looking, I'm like, oh man, this is crazy. But once I just kind of block that and just focus on my game, and because if I focus on that, they'll be pleased. So they're happy with my performance.
He was elated the whole time he was talking. He's just got a big smile on his face. A 0-0 draw. I mean, he did his job. He played well defensively. I mean, really well. Anchored. He was right in the middle in front of Galese. And so anything that he didn't do was going to be exposed. And they asked him, what was it like as your first game you step in, you had to play the likes of Lucho Acosta, Brenner, and Brandon Vasquez. And he said, they're fast and strong, and they're a lot faster and stronger than me. And I think that's something that I've got to get used to in this league, is just how quick it moves and how physical these guys are.
Speaking of Anchor, if you want to start a podcast, you can Anchor.fm. All right, let's get through the rest of these games. Austin beat Montreal 1-0. They left it late, 88th minute. Goal by Urruti. There you go. Montreal now one of 4 teams without a goal. They haven't looked really good at all. They lost a lot of their good talent. So Austin gets, I tried to stay away from must win, but when you're looking at 2 home games against 2 teams you're expected to beat, they're only walking away with 3 points. You're expecting at least 4. You want the 6. So the fact that it was even getting super late, I know they played better, if you look at the XG, if you look at the stats, they played better. But ultimately, we count the game by goals. So they almost didn't win this game. They almost left it a 0-0 draw, and they'd be having 1 point in 2 home games. They would be not doing so well. So they had to win this game, as much as a week 2 game can be a must win. But just good for Austin to kind of get there. They're going to have Champions League this week as well, so we'll see how they do on that. But just good for Austin. Montreal just I don't really know what to make of them at this point.
Nothing. Nothing to make of them. But no, yeah, you're right. I think Austin breathing a sigh of relief, because could you imagine if they came out of that game, which is the point? Yikes. I think pitchforks would have been out at that moment.
Yep, I think so too. But you know who got a point though? Chicago.
Yeah,
they get a point in their first ever game of the season against NYCFC. Herbers ties it late in the 77th minute. Good first point for the Fire. NYCFC continue to be disappointing. I don't really know what to make of NYCFC either. They're kind of like a Montreal, where they were both teams that were very good last year. Change of just things in the club, managers, players, for both these teams that have just kind of got shifted around here. And now NYCFC didn't bring that many people in. They didn't look great against Nashville. They didn't score last week. They scored this week. But still, I don't know. This is a club, like we said, we should be having higher expectations for NYCFC. So the fact that they're like so bottom, not doing so hot, is just an absolute. I'm gonna sound like I'm tired. I'm probably sound like a '90s surfer dude. I was about to say like such a huge bummer, that they couldn't, they can't get it going.
Bummer,
but
dude.
It's true. I mean, I don't really know what else to say about NYCFC until they turn it around. I think they can, in the summer bring some more talent in, but how late do you want to leave it? Now there's 9 playoff spots, as we keep saying every week since we learned that. And, so they got the wiggle room. But Chicago, hey, we've been kind of stoking the fire, pun intended there, on how bad they were going to be this season. And 1 game, 1 point, it was at home, but I don't know. Like, maybe they should have beat NYCFC. Like, how bad is NYCFC? How bad is this Fire team? That's kind of like what we don't know right now, when you only have Fire playing 1 game, NYCFC have played 2. And this is the frustrating thing about MLS, especially when there's uneven number of teams, is when that we get to the stage of this team's played 5, this team's played 3, and you're trying to figure out how exactly they match up. It can be a frustrating experience.
Yeah, I think NYCFC is going to give up goals. and they're not going to match them like they used to with when Tati was there. So I think that's where and like you said, Jordan, if you're going 1-1 with Chicago, what do you think? I mean, if you're an NYCFC fan, that's a team you should easily beat. They're not a good team, I don't think. And I think especially you should score even if you're on the road. But NYCFC just left a lot to be desired. I think Santi Rodriguez will help. He's been a good help over the last 18 months that he's been with the club, kind of on a loan deal. But filling into that midfield, he's got to have somebody at the end of it. And I'm not sure Thais Magno or Gabby's gonna be that guy up top that's gonna score a lot of goals and put them away like Tati did.
No, Magno, is most people want to see him more on the wing. He's not really like a number 9 in that sense. So I guess we'll see. Do they bring in a number 9? Do they do something that'll?
Jordan, they had a number 9 that left, but I can't remember who that was. Bear, that's right. That's who it was.
Yes, an interleague trade too, which not a good look for them. He's got 2 goals on the season.
And looks great.
Dallas 3, Galaxy 1. LA had lost 6 straight in Frisco. You can tally another there, I guess, because Galaxy take the lead and Dallas stormed back. Jesus Fair with the brace. There was an equalizer from Velasco. There you go. Right? 3-1. I was thinking 1-0. It was Joveljic, who, of course, is getting more playing time due to Chicharito's injury. And you're thinking maybe LA's kind of, this is LA's first game of the season. Maybe they're kind of going to be starting off really well. Dallas kind of disappointed last week. Nope, Dallas comes back. Jesus Ferreira, who missed quite a few chances last week, comes back and scores 2 this week, kind of getting him back in the swing of things.
My golden boot choice finally off the mark.
Yeah.
Fantastic. 2
there he's got 2.
It looks good. Jordan, big thing with LA Galaxy. They didn't defend well last year, and it's not off to a good start. Chris Mavinga looked awful as a center back for LA Galaxy. They brought him over from Toronto. Greg knows him from his time in Toronto and got caught ball watching quite a bit. It's like, did you just forget? And then also Raheem Edwards, same thing. Defensive issues. The first ball that goes to Paul Arriola that both of them don't clear, and Arriola just makes a fool of all of them to get it to Velasco. It was a joke. I mean, if you're a professional athlete, defensive player, and that's like the 2 goals they gave up, just not acceptable. Both of them just not great looks for LA Galaxy and their defensive issues. They'll score goals this year. I'm not concerned about that. But again, can they really rely on Bond to kind of sit back there and stop everything that comes at him?
Rapids 0, SKC 0. Just both of these teams just not really off to a good start here. Both of them are teams that have not scored, like you pointed out before. Yappy had thought he had scored. This was called as offside. Yarborough scored, making some good saves. But SKC, I kind of said it in the previous show. This is a game they should go out there and try to win.
Yeah.
I mean, you should try to win every game. But
don't try to win.
Yeah, don't try to win. There's tanking now, right? No,
yeah,
but Colorado got stomped by Seattle 4-0. SKC, I thought, played pretty decently against Portland, just couldn't score a goal. And in this game, can't score a goal. And that's a problem, I think, that they had, obviously last year, and kind of looking ahead to see, is this going to be a continuation? Because I had SKC rebounding. So kind of worried about my prospects of our previews. Predictions.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to come down to scoring goals, and they're looking to add defensively.
And not giving up goals, right?
Right. Yeah, right. Well, I mean, they add defensively, right? They're going to look to add defensively. They add Danny Rosero, who we talked about.
You said Rojas.
Danny Rojas. If they did add Danny Rojas, I think it'd be better.
They'd be able to score, yeah.
Right. But yeah, Darren Yappy, though, I'm excited for, because I think just watching him, he just looks like he has fun. He's going to score a lot of goals in this league, and he's only 18 years old. So I'm excited to see how he kind of pans out in Colorado. He might need a different team or a whole lot of players to come with him because Colorado look awful so far. And like I said, Jordan Robin Frazier, you and I talked about it, where he could be one of those people that's seats very warm right now.
San Jose beat Vancouver 2-1. This is another game, Logan, that Vancouver, as much as you didn't think they had scored, they scored in this game first and then give up, just like they did against RSL last week, 2 goals to lose the game. Ibobasi, Agapo, scoring these goals late for San Jose to make it a 2-1 victory for them. So a good rebound for San Jose. I think we had said that Vancouver, that was one of the fun facts. Vancouver did pretty well against San Jose. So San Jose at home beat the Whitecaps. So that's, I guess, a big deal. And then looking at Seattle, they win 2-0 over RSL. Jordan Morris scoring again. Hebert scoring again. They just look like Seattle just looks unreal at this point. So if we go ahead and look at the standings in the West, Seattle in first place with 6 points, St. Louis in second with 6, just like we all thought. LAFC in third with 3 points. Dallas in fourth. Minnesota in fifth. Austin in sixth. San Jose in seventh. Portland in eighth. Salt Lake in ninth. All those teams have 3 points underneath of St. Louis. And if the playoffs were to start today, those are your playoff teams. Below that line is Kansas City and Colorado with 1 point each. And then the teams that still have 0 points in the West, Vancouver, LA, and Houston. Houston with a -4 goal differential, which is currently leading for Wooden Spoon. Since the Eastern Conference has Miami top with 6 points, New England in second with 6, Nashville in third with 4th, Atlanta in 4th with 4 points, Cincy in 5th, Orlando in 6th. Those are the teams that have 4 points. Teams with 3 points are Philly in 7th, DC in 8th, Columbus in 9th. Those would be your playoff teams. Outside of the playoffs currently with 1 point each is Chicago, Toronto, Red Bulls, and NYCFC. And the teams with 0 points, Charlotte and Montreal. Both of those teams with -3 goal differential. So we have some Champions League games. We talked about that on Wednesday, but we have on Tuesday, Austin is going to face Violet. Alianza versus Philadelphia. That's at 8 o'clock Eastern on FS1. Tigres versus Orlando at 10 o'clock. I think that's FS2. Wednesday, Vancouver host Real España. And Thursday, Alajuelense versus LAFC at 10 p.m. Moving on to the MLS schedule for next Saturday. These games kick off starting at 12 o'clock. This game is on Apple TV, and it is free, and it is also on Fox. Charlotte versus Atlanta, hosted by Charlotte. 5 o'clock, Vancouver hosts Dallas. This one is free as well here. Cincinnati, 7:30, hosting Seattle, which should be a fun game. DC versus Orlando at 7:30. NYCFC and Miami at 7:30. Philadelphia hosting Chicago Fire at 7:30. Toronto versus Columbus at 7:30. SKC at 8:30 hosting LA Galaxy. That'll be battle of the bottom right now. Minnesota 8:30 host New York Red Bulls. Nashville, this game is free, hosting Montreal at 8:30. Salt Lake hosting Austin at 9:30. That one's free. Portland and St. Louis at 10:30. That one's free. And San Jose, Colorado at 10:30. That one is also free. On Sunday, we have one game, LAFC versus New England at 10:30 on the season pass. So just a reminder real quick of which ones are free. Charlotte and Atlanta, Cincinnati, Seattle, Nashville, Montreal, RSL, Austin, San Jose, Colorado, and Portland versus St. Louis. Any games stick out to you there, Logan, that you're looking forward to?
Yeah, I would say, honestly, the St. Louis and Portland game. It's at Providence Park, but 6 points, Jordan, for St. Louis. So they're looking to make it 9 at Providence. Imagine, we talked about this earlier on the show. So if you didn't listen to it, go back and listen to it. But man, I can't imagine what the league would be like if they bounced it on its head and got 9 points out of 3 matches.
Yeah, so here's the schedule for the rest of the week. We previewed games today because Logan and I are both busy this week. Our friend Matt is getting married, so we got a lot of groomsmen duties to handle this week. So no Wednesday episode. What you're going to get Wednesday, of course, is the next episode of our Ted Lasso recaps. Thursday, I am releasing the first episode of The Closed Pyramid, which is a look at lower league soccer, hence named that because there's no promotion relegation in this soccer pyramid. So that's going to be previewing USL season, which starts this Saturday as well. So we look through how 2022 went and looking ahead to 2023 for USL stuff. And then we'll be back probably Monday. I should be back in the back home on Monday, so probably should be able to continue our normal podcasts then. But thank you for kind of dealing with probably, I would say, lower sound quality. I don't know, this room's kind of probably echoey, but wanted to make sure we still got this knocked out for you. But if you want to give us reviews on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or if you want to reach us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, it is at Stateside Show, or you can email us statesideshow@gmail.com. Thank you all for joining us today, and have a great rest of your week, and we'll catch you next time.